Hey gamers, Chris here. This is Treantmonk's Temple, where knowledge is power, and we are in the month of the Gish. Last time I brought you my Jack of all trades build, which was a build that could use ranged weapons or melee weapons or spells and switch in between them based on what you need at the time. This character that I'm going to be showing you today is not about versatility. This character is a striker. We call these builds a glass cannon build because this is all about doing as much damage as you can. This is not a defensive powerhouse. This is an offensive powerhouse. This character will use resources in order to increase damage, and that damage will be very good. So if that is the character you want to make, this is the build you want to look at, and that is the Soradin, or the Sorcerer Paladin multiclass. Now, there are a lot of different ways to make this build. I'm going to show you my personal favorite. It's very one note. This is an offense build, not a defense build. Just keep that in mind. I will take some defensive things. We don't want to completely abandon defense. We're going to be in melee. This is a melee character. This character doesn't pick up bows. This character doesn't shoot cantrips from range if it can at all be avoided. The idea of this character is get in as close as you can, use spells if you need to, and then once you're in melee, you start striking and you start smiting and you start quickening booming blades and green flame blades to do even more damage. This is about a lot of damage, so let's get started. Okay, so we're beginning here with our ultimate spell blade. We're going to just turn off our homebrew content and our magic and Eberron stuff. We're not going to be using any of those things. Now let's look at race, because there are a few different options for race with this character that are reasonably good. The most obvious of those is the Variant Human. Like with the Jack of all trades, the Variant Human is an excellent choice because the Variant Human provides you the bonuses to the ability scores you want, and then that feat on top of it. And that feat can be used to alleviate the concerns of concentration saving throws. So things like Warcaster or Lucky or Resilient Constitution. In addition, of course, you get the additional skill proficiency and extra language. This is a strong choice for this build, not the choice I'm going to make today. Because unlike the Jack of all trades build, I don't think Variant Human is a necessity for this class or this build. So because it's not a necessity, let's try something else just for a change. Now, we all know the Dragonborn does not have a great reputation because the racial abilities of the Dragonborn aren't very good. You get resistance to one type of energy, which is useful, but it's really circumstantial. And then the other thing is their breath weapon, and their breath weapon isn't very good, and it doesn't scale well, so it ends up not being a very strong ability. So really all you've got is you've got a +2 strength and a +1 charisma. Fortunately, if you want to play a Dragonborn, this is the time that those ability scores are perfect. So if you want to play a Dragonborn for any reason, this might be the build to make it. I don't think Dragonborn is your best choice, but I think in this case, it's a decent choice. Now, there is one type of tiefling that works really well for this build. In fact, this was very close to my choice for the race I was going to pick, and this is the Zerial tiefling. I might be pronouncing that wrong. Is it Zerial? Zerial? I'm not sure. What I do know is it gives you a +2 to charisma, +1 to strength, and then it gives you bonus spells. And amongst those bonus spells are some smite spells. So you can get the Searing Smite spell and the Binding Smite spell, and you don't have to select them. So they're in addition to your regular spells known. It's also going to give you an extra casting, so you can cast these spells. Now, smite spells aren't that great, but if they're free, I'll take them easy because although this character is going to have some very potent things it can do with its bonus action, it's not necessarily going to have potent things to do with its bonus action every round. So being able to cast some spells that will increase damage is a good choice. The Zerial Tiefling is a good choice. You also get things like your Dark Vision and your resistance to fire damage. A lot of good stuff here. Very strong choice. Well worth considering. Another really great choice for this build is the Half-Elf. Again, you've got those ability scores right where you want them, and you're going to get +4 instead of +3 because you're going to get the +2 to charisma, then a +1 to your strength, and then you can put a +1 in either your dexterity or your constitution. Probably your constitution is the better choice of those two. In addition, you get the dark vision, you get the 2 additional skill proficiencies, or you can trade off those skill proficiencies with one of the half-elf variants. I like the half-drow. I think that's really good. You get some bonus spells with that. I'll always take more spells, of course. Wood Elf is a good choice, too, because you get that 35-foot movement rate, and this is a character that's going to rely on being able to get into melee. So if you can increase your movement rate, that has obvious value. So Half-Elf is a good choice, and the variants for Half-Elf, lots of good choices there. High Elf is also a good choice for a variant Half-Elf because you can grab the Moving Blade cantrip, which doesn't rely on your intelligence, so it doesn't matter that you're choosing it as an elf cantrip. And that just means 1 extra cantrip, and you're going to find that this character is going to be pretty hungry about cantrips at level 1. That eases off as we move up in level. Now, here's my choice for this build. I'm going to make a Fallen Aasimar Sorodin build. The Fallen Aasimar gives me a +2 to charisma, +1 to strength. That's right where I want it. Now, I know some people will talk about using a dex based character here and maybe a rapier, and then you could use a rapier and a shield maybe, and that's an okay way to build this character, but keep in mind that there are multi-class requirements to consider. Paladin has a strength requirement. This can make this character so incredibly stat hungry that it ends up, it's called MAD, or multiple attribute dependency, or multiple ability score dependency. You just end up so spread out that you can't really concentrate on the 2 things that really matter, which is your attack ability score and your spellcasting ability score. Fallen Aasimar will give us Dark Vision. It gives us Celestial Resistance, which is resistance to both necrotic and radiant damage. Radiant damage isn't something that tends to affect characters very often, but it's certainly necrotic damage comes up reasonably often. Healing Hands is a minor ability, but it does provide you a healing option. You can use a standard action and heal a party member a number of hit points equal to your level. We're going to pick up the Light Cantrip for free, but the main thing here is the Necrotic Shroud. So this is the reason I'm choosing the Fallen Aasimar. The Necrotic Shroud. Starting at 3rd level, you can use your action to unleash the divine energy within yourself, causing your eyes to turn to pools of darkness and 2 skeletal, ghostly, flightless wings to sprout from your back. So it looks cool. The instant you transform, other creatures within 10 feet of you that can see you must each succeed on a charisma saving throw, DC 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your charisma modifier. We're going to have a good charisma, so that's good. Or become frightened of you until the end of your next turn. The frightened condition is very useful. Keeps them from moving closer to you. It also gives them disadvantage on attack rolls when they can see you. So this is a great debuff on our enemies that we can do right on round 1 as a standard action. And because it's not a spell, that means we can cast a spell with our bonus action. Now with Sorcerer, of course, we can quicken spells, which means we could even cast a standard action spell and then quicken it to a bonus action. And because we're not casting a spell with our standard action, then we can do this all in one round. But more so, this is why we want this ability. Your transformation lasts for 1 minute or until you end it as a bonus action. So 10 rounds, that means this will tend to last an entire fight unless that fight is just a marathon. During it, once on each of your turns, you can deal extra necrotic damage to one target when you deal damage to it with an attack or a spell. So there's versatility because we're going to be using some spells plus attacks. So very useful there. The extra necrotic damage equals your level. So this scales pretty nicely. Eventually we'll be doing 20 extra damage per round. Think about it this way. If we do 10 rounds of combat, that's 200 points of damage, no saving throw. Even at level 10, that's 100 points of damage we could get with this if we can use it for 10 rounds. Even in a 4-round combat, that's 40 points of extra damage. So that adds up to a fair amount of damage. And this is a damage-based character, so when we get abilities that just increase our damage, we're going to jump on them. Now this is only usable once per long rest, so this is a big fight buff. It's also a better buff if we have a chance to prepare for the combat, of course, because we can save that action. Now there are 2 ways we can make this character. We can take Sorcerer first, or we can take Paladin first. We will be multi-classing with both. By level 2, we're going to have 1 level in each class. And there are 2 things to consider either way. If we take Sorcerer first, the big advantage is we become proficient in Constitution saving throws. Constitution saving throws are the save you make for concentration. This is like getting the Resilient feat, although you still aren't getting an extra saving throw proficiency. We're giving up a different saving throw proficiency. You basically trade Wisdom for Constitution. That's a good trade for this character. There are some significant downsides, though. Number one, at level 1, you will not be a melee character. You will be having no armor and probably a lousy dex. So you just can't be going into melee. You will have no martial weapon proficiency either. So unless you want to go into melee and attack with a dagger and no armor and a terrible dex, which is not such a good idea, you basically have to wait to level 2 to become a melee character. That's not the end of the world, but it is something to consider. The second thing is, of course, you're going to end up with less hit points at level 1, 4 less hit points, and so you'll always be 4 hit points behind what you would have been if you had picked Paladin first. And finally, and this is the one that's the kicker for me, because I've heard all over the place from optimizers, you should take 1 level of Sorcerer, then go into Paladin, get your Constitution saving throw, and then go on with Paladin from there. But the problem is, as a strength-based character, we will not have a good dexterity. Best we can really do is a 12. That's a +1 modifier. Now, if we take Paladin second, we will not get heavy armor proficiency. Paladin does not provide heavy armor proficiency with multi-classing. That means that you're going to get medium armor proficiency, which is the best you can do is half plate. So that already puts you 1 behind armor class of full plate, even if you have a 14 dexterity. But we won't have a 14 dexterity. Best we could possibly bring to the table is a 12. So that's 2 armor class lost. So 2 armor class lost means you're going to get hit significantly more often. And when you get hit significantly more often, that means significantly more saving throws you have to make. So that extra bonus you get on those saving throws is going to require you to make a whole bunch more saving throws, never mind the fact that you took a bunch more damage. So for those reasons, I actually still like Paladin as the first level, even though I'm not getting Constitution as a proficient saving throw. It's a tough call, though. So I certainly understand why you might take Sorcerer first. Definitely, if you have worked out a way to do a dexterity build, maybe you've rolled your stats and you've rolled really well and you can afford that 13 that you need for multi-class requirements, or you have a DM who relaxes multi-class requirements. In those cases, it makes a lot more sense to go Sorcerer first, and then you can just wear your half plate and you maybe give up 1 armor class, which isn't a big deal. But when we're giving up more than 1 armor class, that's too much. We're a melee character. Yes, this is an offense character, but offense doesn't mean we should ignore defense. We want to still have the best defense possible, and this is the way to do it. Now, as a Paladin, we get 2 main abilities, Divine Sense, which isn't a great ability, but it does rely on Charisma, and our Charisma is good, so that means we can use this 4 times a day. And we get Lay on Hands, which heals 5 hit points, or we can use it to heal things like blindness and that kind of thing. It's a pretty useful ability, even though we're not going to take a whole lot of Paladin. Lay on Hands is something that will continue to be useful as we level up. Now we're going to choose 2 proficiencies. Now I'm really liking Athletics here because we are a strength-based character. Remember, Athletics also helps you resist grapple or initiate grapples. So this is a good choice. The second one, I'm thinking a social skill. Persuasion would be a good choice because we are a charisma-based social character. That means that Persuasion is probably the one that's going to come up most often. I like the synergy, though, with Intimidation. So I'm going to go ahead and take Intimidation as my second skill. So then we move on to our background, and I took the soldier background. I figured this is an offensive character. And guess what? Because we already have both the skills that would be given with soldier, we can just pick 2 new skills. Now, I always choose Perception. You guys know that. This will be no exception. I'll choose Perception, even though I'm not going to end up with a good Perception score. The more Perception you have, the better. And then the second skill I am going to choose is that Persuasion skill, because it will come up reasonably often. Then I get a gaming set, don't care, going to take dice set. So moving on to our starting equipment, this is another reason we might want to choose Paladin before Sorcerer, is our starting equipment ends up being a lot more significant. So we can either begin with a martial weapon and a shield, or 2 martial weapons. I'm going to take 2 martial weapons. This is going to be a two-handed character, two-handed build, because that way we have a hand free for casting. We don't have the Warcaster feat, but as long as we have a two-handed weapon, we don't need the Warcaster feat to be able to cast spells. So the first one I'm going to take is a Greatsword. Greatsword will end up being more damage than any other weapon you could choose. 2d6 damage is better than 1d12. I did do a video on this. The second one I'm going to choose is a net. I could choose a longbow here, but I'm going to be terrible with a longbow, so I'm probably never going to use it. Net is something, it's a little unusual, but I might use it once in a while. It has some use. Finally, I can take 5 javelins or any simple melee weapon. That's easy. I'll take the 5 javelins. My character is a strength character. That means he will be able to use the javelins using his strength. It gives me some kind of ranged option that isn't too bad. I can choose a priest pack or an explorer's pack. I like explorer's pack more than the priest pack. And then I get chainmail and a holy symbol. The holy symbol I'm going to choose is an amulet. Maybe I'll wear something around my neck. Soldier starting equipment doesn't really matter. I'll take a dagger and a set of dice because that's what I'm proficient in. And we'll add our starting equipment. So now let's do our ability scores. Now with this character, I'm going to do a point buy. Now a standard array, what you want to do, get your strength to 16 and your constitution and charisma are probably going to have to just be 14s. But with a point buy, we can have the strength 16. We can also have charisma to 16 and still get a constitution of 14. So if you have point buy, it's just better than standard array here. Makes a significant difference. You could still make this character with standard array. Just expect that you're going to have one less in an important ability. And that's just the way it is. If you roll, of course, and you roll well, you might get the best of all the worlds. But if you do roll stats and you don't roll 3 good stats or 3 decent stats, this probably isn't the build for you. So I'm going to take my charisma to 14. That's going to jump it to 16, including my racial bonus. And I'm going to take my strength and put a 15, and that's going to jump that to 16, including my racial bonus. And I'm going to take my constitution and jump it up to 14. That leaves me only 4 points remaining. So what I'm going to do with those is I'm going to take my dexterity to 10, so at least I don't have a negative, and my wisdom to 10, so at least I don't have a negative. My intelligence will remain at 8. Not planning to use many intelligence-based skills, so it might not be that big a deal. Looking at this character at level 1, it's a reasonably effective melee character. I mean, an armor class of 16 is okay. We're doing 2d6 plus 3 damage with a greatsword with a plus 5 to hit. That's reasonably good at first level. 12 hit points is reasonably good at first level. We have our divine sense, we have our healing hands, we have a lay on hands. This isn't a powerhouse character at this level, but as a melee character, it's reasonable and does a reasonable amount of damage, probably as much damage as you could expect to do with a first level character. Fighter or barbarian might outdo it a little bit at this level. That won't last. Now we're going to level up. I'm going to go to level 2 right now, and the level 2 I'm going to pick is again in Paladin. So we're going to take a second level of Paladin. This is to get Smite. Divine Smite is going to give us the ability to use spell slots to increase our damage. This is a damage-based character, and Smite is really important. This is really the main reason we're taking Paladin in the first place, is for the Smite ability. So we want to get it as soon as possible. So we're going to go ahead and take it right at second level. We could do Sorcerer now and get into things like Booming Blade and Green Flame Blade, which would be okay, but that would put us not as far ahead as being able to Smite. We also get a fighting style, so we can choose defense, dueling, great weapon fighting, or protection. There's really only 2 choices here. With this build, you want to take either defense or great weapon fighting. Defense is going to increase your armor class by 1. Great weapon fighting allows re-rolling of dice on damage. It doesn't end up making up a lot of damage, but it might end up 1 or 2 points around. The thing is that this is an offense character, so when I'm making these kind of decisions, I'm going to prioritize the damage, so I'm going to take great weapon fighting. As a second level Paladin, we're going to get 2 spell slots, 2 first level spell slots, but we get 4 prepared spells. We can't use ritual spells with a Paladin, so no reason for us to prioritize ritual spells here. Now, as you know, Bless is a very strong buff at first level, and would be a good choice, but because I am going to be getting it anyways through another option, the first spell I'm going to take here is Divine Favor. Divine Favor is a bonus action casting, and it increases all our damage by 1d4. There's been a lot of debate over whether Divine Favor is going to end up doing more damage, or just using that first level slot for a Smite is going to end up doing more damage. But remember, you can combine them, right? There you can go into melee, use your bonus action for a Divine Favor, hit, and then add a Smite, so you can get both. And ultimately, Divine Favor is going to do more damage if the battle is long. Smites are going to do more damage if the battle is short. Divine Favor also is going to require your concentration, which means that you might have to make concentration saves, which means you might lose it. So all in all, I don't love this compared to Smite, but it's an option that can go in addition to Smites. So we can increase our overall damage, especially in the long run. Once we have more spell slots, Divine Favor doesn't hurt so much. The other thing about Divine Favor to keep in mind is, unlike Hex or Hunter's Mark, this does not require a bonus action for us to change targets. That's a big deal because this character is going to have some bonus action options. So this is really just one bonus action to cast, and then it's just going to keep delivering damage as long as we concentrate for up to 1 minute. The second spell I'm going to take is Wrathful Smite. I'm not a huge fan of the Smite spells, but it's important to keep in mind that Smite spells are something that we can combine with regular Smites to increase our damage even more. They do use a bonus action. They do use your concentration. You need to cast them before you attack, which means unlike a Smite, you can't just choose to add it after you know you hit. So there's a number of downsides here. I do like Wrathful Smite though, because Wrathful Smite deals an additional 1d6 psychic damage. Psychic damage is lovely. Very few things are immune to psychic damage. But in addition, if we target a creature, it must make a wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the spell ends. The spell lasts up to a minute of concentration. As an action, the creature can make a wisdom check against your spell save DC to steal its resolve at the end of this and end this spell. That means it needs to use its action to make further saving throws. So unlike other fear effects that tend to provide you a saving throw every round, this one requires their action in order to make another saving throw, or they just stay frightened. Now this is a character that, as you can see, we're starting to combine things that use frightened. That's not by mistake. The other two spells I'm not going to be using nearly as much, but the two spells I'm going to select are Shield of Faith. Shield of Faith will give us a +2 armor class as a bonus action, so a defensive option. Again, we're focusing more on offense, but we've taken our offense already. So this just gives us some versatility. If we want to increase our defense, +2 AC is okay. Now it uses your concentration. I'm not liking this like I like Shield, but I'm going to get Shield too. So I could potentially even combine this with Shield. I'm also going to take Thunderous Smite. Thunderous Smite can push a target. So basically it's like your standard Smite spells. You cast it as a bonus action before you attack. It requires concentration. This one does an additional 2d6 thunder damage, which is okay, and then if it fails a saving throw, it gets pushed 10 feet. So sometimes there's occasions where you want to push an enemy. Maybe you're on a bridge or near a cliff, or maybe that you just need to move them. So Thunderous Smite gives you an option to do that. So this is our character at second level. Not a lot has changed, but keep in mind we can now cast spells. We now can use Smite. That has increased our offensive capability significantly. Now, keep in mind that with 2 spell slots, they will run out fast. So this is not somebody who's going to be able to bring that extra damage every combat. This is really about choosing the right time. So when you're in that big fight, that's maybe in the first round, you're going to use a Divine Favor, and then maybe you'll wait and then see. And if you score a critical at some point, then you throw the Smite on. That's really what you like to do with criticals, is if you have a Smite, you throw it on so you can double those dice. So now we're going to move to level 3. Now one option here is we could just go for 5 levels of Paladin. And the reason we would do that is to get that second attack, because that second attack means more Smites. More Smites means more potential damage. Now, because Smites are a limited resource, you will end up, it's called a Nova, when you throw all your resources into a very short period of time to bring a massive amount of damage. Paladins can do that. They can attack multiple times, and then they can smite multiple times. They could even potentially then throw a smite spell on top of that to bring in a massive amount of damage in a single round. But a round or two, and suddenly they're out of spells, they're out of smites. So it's a very short-term thing. But being able to attack twice is going to bring more damage every round. And to something like a Divine Favor spell, a second attack then becomes useful for that as well. However, with this character, we're going to now start to concentrate a little bit more on the spell casting and having those spells fuel those smites and increase our duration of amount of time we can do those Nova abilities. So we're going to switch into Sorcerer right now. Now with the Sorcerer, we need to pick a Sorcerer's origin. Now, if I'm playing a casting Sorcerer, my favorite is actually the Shadow Sorcerer. I love the Shadow Sorcerer as a caster. But when we are talking about a melee character, then I like the Divine Soul, because the Divine Soul is bringing in those cleric spells, and there's a couple cleric spells that really work nicely with melee, particularly Spirit Guardians. We know how great Spirit Guardians is. Being able to cast that in melee using our charisma, which is good, is a very strong use of special ability. In addition, of course, with Divine Soul, we're getting the Favorite of the Gods ability. So let's look at that Favorite of the Gods ability right now. Starting at first level, Divine Power guards your destiny. If you fail a saving throw or miss with an attack roll, so this includes weapon attacks, you can roll 2d4 and add it to the total, possibly changing the outcome. Once you use this feature, you can't use it again until you finish a short or long rest. So like Channel Divinity, we're going to get this back every time we take a short rest. So that 2d4, you can count on that being in the range of 4 to 5, maybe 6. And so that adds a lot to a failed saving throw or an attack roll. With this character, I'm probably going to be using it if I miss an attack roll, but I think I'm close. Favorite of the Gods is a good choice. Get yourself that hit. Now you can apply smites, get a lot of damage. We now need to choose an option for our Divine Magic. This is going to give us one additional spell known. We can choose Chaos, Evil, Good, Law, or Neutrality, and then we can get things like Cure Wounds, or Bane, or Bless. I'm going to choose Law. Law will get me Bless. Bless is a good buff. I didn't take it with my level 1 of Paladin because I knew I was going to take it with my level 1 of Sorcerer. So one of the nice things about being a Sorcerer is at first level you get 4 cantrip selections. That's more than any other spellcaster gets at first level. And with this Sorcerer, it's so easy to pick these. Those 4 don't last very long because there's so many good options here. Number 1, I definitely want to take Booming Blade. Booming Blade is a 1-action cantrip used as part of an action to cast a spell. You must make a melee attack with a weapon against one creature within the spell's range. On a hit, the target suffers the attack's normal effects, and it becomes sheathed in booming energy until the start of your next turn. If the target willingly moves before then, it immediately takes 1d8 thunder damage, and the spell ends. That's not that great. So from levels 1 through 4, this isn't a great cantrip. But level 5, it becomes a good cantrip, because this spell's damage increases when you reach higher levels. At 5th level, the melee attack deals an additional 1d8 thunder damage to the target. So now the target doesn't have to move at all. Just by casting this, we're adding to our damage. And the damage the target takes from moving increases to 2d8. So if they move, now they're taking an additional 3d8 damage by using a Booming Blade over standard attack. That's like a 2nd level smite. Then both d8s increase at 11th level and 17th level. So it goes from 3d8 to 5d8 to 7d8 if the target moves. And again, if they don't move, they're still taking additional damage from this. So it's a good spell. And it's not uncommon to be in a situation where the enemy is going to be moving, and then you know they're going to be moving. You can hit them with the Booming Blade, or it can be used in conjunction with something like Bard using a Dissonant Whispers. So there are ways to trigger this as well. Second one we're going to take is Green Flame Blade. Green Flame Blade is similar to Booming Blade. One thing to keep in mind is instead of thunder damage, this is doing fire damage. In general, I like thunder damage better than fire damage, but sometimes you know that creatures might be vulnerable to fire, in which case Green Flame Blade gives you that fire damage option. Green Flame Blade is the cantrip you want to cast if your enemy is adjacent to another enemy, because then you don't have to have them move. You're going to get that secondary damage automatically. So as part of an action used to cast a spell, you make a melee attack. On a hit, the target suffers the attack's normal effects, and green fire leaps from the target to a different creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of it. The second creature takes fire damage equal to your spellcasting ability modifier. So this is a better spell, I think, at level 1 through 4 than Booming Blade, because you know when that secondary effect is in play. There's no gambling. If you hit somebody with a green flame blade and there's another target applicable, you will get that secondary damage. Now it's going to be 3 instead of a d8. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because remember, that 3 is going to become a 4, which is eventually going to become a 5 as we get to a certain level. Now we're not increasing our charisma first, so that might take a while. But like Booming Blade, this scales well. Damage increases when you reach higher levels. At 5th level, the melee attack deals an additional 1d8 fire damage to the target, and the fire damage to the second creature increases at d8. So it's increasing 2d8 with each scaling, just like with Booming Blade. So I have 2 more options here. There is a temptation on my part to take some kind of damage-dealing cantrip, like a Toll the Dead, or like a Firebolt, to give me a ranged option. Because this character isn't good at range, I can throw javelins. I'm not terrible at that, but I'm not good at that. But there's 2 cantrips that are so good, I just feel like I have to take them. Those are Guidance and Minor Illusion. I've talked about both these spells before. I've said with both of them, if they're on your spell list, you should take them. It's very rare for them both to be on the same spell list. This is the one case where they are. I feel like I need to take them both. Now I get 2 first level spells known. Keep in mind that we only have 3 first level spells at this point, because those 2 Paladin levels and our 1 Sorcerer level combine, it ends up being equal to a 2nd level caster. So 3 first level spells. Some party members are going to be able to cast 2nd level spells already at this point, so we're going to be behind them. We're not going to have a lot of castings. And Sorcerers also don't get ritual spells. So we're going to have a lot more spells than we're going to be able to cast. The first spell, however, that I'm going to take is definitely Shield. Now, Shield is an offense spell, but because I'm going to be concentrating on things, Shield is going to help me prevent having to make concentration saves, because I will be able to turn a lot of hits into misses. Shield is a great spell because it gives you that +5 AC for the entire round. So if you get attacked several times, you can just use the 1 reaction, you get that +5 bonus all the way through. The second spell I'm going to take is Healing Word. Healing Word, of course, allows you to heal at range. It allows you to cast it with your hands full, and it only uses a bonus action, and it's going to add a d4 plus 3 healing to an ally while I'm still attacking in melee. I'm going to jump 2 levels here, and we're going to take this Sorcerer to level 3. We're keeping the Paladin at level 2 for now, but we are going to be going back to the Paladin with this build. So we're going to jump our Divine Sorcerer to level 3. That's level 4 spellcasting overall. That means we are going to have 2nd level spells available, 1st level spells available, and because we have Sorcerer 3, we will have 2nd level spells to cast. We also are going to have meta magic at this point. Now, the first meta magic I'm going to take is normally one that I think is overrated, and that is Quicken Spell. Quicken Spell, when you're playing a pure caster, I think is highly overrated, because people think that they're going to be able to cast 2 spells, but in fact, unless your standard action is a cantrip, you can only cast 1 spell regardless. So what ends up happening is you cast a good spell, you use your meta magic, and then you cast a Firebolt. All right, and to do that, a little bit of extra damage maybe if you hit, and that's not that good, right? But here we can use our Quicken Spell in melee to get an additional Booming Blade. That's a lot of extra damage we can get, and then we can still make our regular attack in combat. And we can still make our regular attack in combat, which can also be a Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade. So we're talking 2 Booming Blades or Green Flame Blades. Remember, at level 5, which we're a level 5 character now, those have scaled. So they're both doing more damage now. And we can do up to 2 attacks in a round. It's going to cost 2 sorcery points to do this. So this is like a 1-round thing. You do it once and you kind of just blow your wad. Also keep in mind that because we're probably using cantrips in melee all the time, if we want to cast some other kind of spell that's a standard action spell, we can now change it to a bonus action. This is a good way to use something like a Bless spell, and it is going to be very effective in a couple more levels. The second meta magic I'm going to take is Twin Spell. We all know Twin Spell is a very good spell, or a very good meta magic. It's not so great yet. But as we get into higher levels of Sorcerer, and we get spells like Polymorph, being able to do things like twinning them is massive. Now we're going to pick 2 additional spells known. I'm going to choose both second level spells because I don't have any second level spells yet, and I have second level spell slots, so I'm going to have a few options for second level spells. The first choice I'm going to make is Spiritual Weapon, because Spiritual Weapon, of course, just gives me additional damage every round as a bonus action. I still have a fairly limited number of things I can do with the bonus action. I can do a Smite spell. I could do a Quickened spell once per day, or I can do a Healing Word, and that's really about it. So Spiritual Weapon is still really useful because I have those bonus actions available, and it's basically 1 more attack each round. The second spell I'm going to choose is Misty Step. Because this is a character that needs to get into melee, Misty Step is very useful. It gives us 1 other bonus action option, and this spell allows you to teleport 30 feet, which means that we can get past enemy lines, or maybe just that additional 30 feet of movement we needed to get into melee. We don't want to be throwing javelins whenever we can avoid it. So here's our character at 5th level. So we're now a 2nd level Paladin and a 3rd level Divine Soul Sorcerer. We are going to have 4 first level slots and 3 second level slots. Those first level slots give us lots of options. One thing we're going to need to do once in a while is a shield spell. Not going to be able to avoid that if we're taking on an enemy that we know is going to do lots of damage and they hit us. We want to try a shield spell in those cases. So although it's expensive to use up that spell slot, I think it's necessary just to stay up. Remember that if you go down, your offense is nothing. We're also going to use first level slots occasionally for a Bless spell. Bless is just a good buff, and just for ourselves and for 2 other allies. And it's adding to our saving throws. That means it's adding to our concentration saving throws, and it's adding to our hit rolls because this character isn't doing any damage unless they hit. For our second level spells, we have 3 slots. We have Misty Step, we have Spiritual Weapon. Spiritual Weapon is probably a spell you want to cast near the beginning of a combat. Going to use a bonus action, and it's a d8 plus 3 damage once a round as a bonus action. This is not something I'm going to want to do into higher levels because I'm going to have better options for bonus actions, and 1d8 plus 3 isn't going to hold up. I can't throw smites onto that. But at this level, it's still pretty good. Misty Step is an option just to help us get into melee. That's the whole point. Or if we drop an enemy, getting to the next opponent. Now, technically speaking, we are only attacking once a round. That means we're going to be using Booming Blade or Green Flame Blade every round. So that gives us our additional d8 damage from that, and potentially an additional 2d8 damage if they move, or if we're using Green Flame Blade, an additional d8 plus 3 damage to an adjacent target. Assuming we have plate mail at this point, we have an armor class of 18. Of course, it might be magic plate mail. There might be other magical items that come into play. This is a character that, if you really want to, you could use a shield. But if you do, you're probably going to want to figure out a way to get the Warcaster feat. Or maybe subtle spell meta magic, because you're going to want to work around that. Also important to remember that we're going to be using some of these slots for smiting. Ideally, if you smite all at once, you're going to be out of spell slots very fast, and you don't get them back on a short rest. So you want to avoid that. But if you hit it with a critical, especially against a tough enemy, you always want to throw a smite on there because you're doubling those dice. Also remember that if you're fighting undead or fiends, you're getting an additional d8 from your smites, which makes at least the first level smite pretty reasonable. So we're going to jump this character 2 more levels, and we're going to take this sorcerer to level 5.